This photo and this painting were both captured at the same time in the same place. But how are they different? The photo has more detail, but the painting has more color. I want to get into how the human eye sees differently from how the camera sees, and how we can learn from that as painters. This is Trinity Church in Newport, Rhode Island. And I think there's a view looking back from the harbor side where it's edge lit and looking interesting in the morning light. I like the fact that the white church is lit from behind, so it's darker than the sky. I'm going to start with pencil on the board to work out the proportions. Now let me break away for a second to show you my easel and tripod and art supply setup, since it's a little bit different from what I've done on previous videos. What's in common with earlier videos is I'm using a tripod mounted easel, but this one mounts on here on top of a quick release plate, and it uses a furniture slider clamp, a little bit different than the friction hinges that we have on the other standard setup for sketchbooks. Now onto this mixing area, I've made a special palette area using just polyethylene coated paper that I've cut into the right size, glued onto an edge of a piece of cardboard, and that just drops in here. This works for oil, acrylic, or Casein, which is what I'll be using. The panel is acrylic primed board. You can use plywood or masonite, and that attaches up on these gripper clamps at the top. And then I put on a rag and a clamp. And one of the things that's nice too is a shelf. This is a tripod shelf which you can make yourself. They're also commercially available. And it's got these little cutouts at the top edge, the back edge, which fit over the legs of the tripod so that you have a shelf right here, right below your whole painting area. Then I put on a little water cup because I'll be working with a water-based medium. And I usually put some brushes here. I have a variety of different brushes that fit into a small handled set so that when you fold this up it's very small. One of them is a filbert brush, which you can see has been cut way down from its original length. And I just typically hold it like this, and it gives me just all the control that I really need, but I don't need all that long handle bumping against myself. One other thing that's nice to have is a Tupperware with a hook on the back of it, and that fits right here on the shelf so that you have a place to rinse out your brushes in between painting. So now let's go ahead and squeeze out the colors. Now this is Casein paint, and here are the colors I'll be using. Titanium white, cadmium yellow light, cadmium orange, cadmium red scarlet, which is a warm red, rose red, which is a quinacridone, a cool red, ultramarine blue deep, cerulean blue, and ivory black. Now if you mix ivory black and yellow together, you get a very interesting green. So you notice I don't have greens on the palette, but I can mix greens with various combinations of yellows with these blues and this black. I start with the light warm colors in the upper left, white, yellow, red, blue, and then black in the lower right. I'll focus just on the central part of this scene. I like the way the trees frame against the building. And let me just start by putting the dark values down for the core of the trees and some of the cast shadows underneath them. This is using black and yellow. I like the way this path goes asymmetrically toward the side of the church, not the middle of the church. And to get this tone and texture of the grass, I'll use a mixture of yellow and blue transparently as a green that I can just wash over lightly, thinly, delicately, transparently over the background. And some of that red and pink kind of underpainting color will come through and give some variation to the grass, because nothing is even and flat. Same thing over on this side. Now I may cover this up with another layer, but if it serves my purpose and matches the value and color and texture, I should be fine. The surface has some canvas on it over which I gessoed it before I left home. So some of the dry brush textures pick up that canvas texture. Now what I'm doing is using that green color over the underpainting darks. The top fringe of any tree or plant is lighter and warmer usually as it meets the sky. So I can paint over these darks. They're dry now because this is Casein. And I'm using that filbert brush. A filbert, for those of you who are not familiar, has a curved tip, but it's still got a flattened quality to it. So it's a nice brush to use for figure painting, or really a lot of purposes. You can use it on the edge, kind of flat like I'm doing now, or you can get a small line with it if you want. I haven't done the sky yet or the church, because I just want to get these big masses down quickly first. Now the church, it's a white church, so slightly off-white in local color, but it's backlit because we're looking into the sun. So it's picking up the blue of the sky, and that's why it's a cool gray color. One of the biggest differences between how a camera sees, either an analog or digital camera, and how a human sees is that a human can see much, much more in a range of values or light and dark tones. So you can see the color in the sky and the color in the deep dark of a shadow underneath a bush. With a camera on a sunny day, if you expose for the shadows, the sky will go pure white. And if you expose for the sky, everything else will go black. While this stays wet, I can come back and paint a cloud layer in front of the sky. For that, I'll mix some white and some warm color. I'm using more of a flat brush now. There's no color in this scene that's pure white. It's all conditioned by some kind of color. Now, since this blue is still wet, I can blend into it and keep that edge fairly soft. It's okay to make a sky fairly detailed, but it's important to keep the values simple and to make them lighter than you think. Most skies are lighter than people paint them. By keeping the sky fairly soft and unified and light in tone, I can put detail elsewhere in the picture, but where in the picture? There's a lot of detail visible in all the leaves and the grass textures and all the stones on the cobblestone path leading to the church. If I spent all my time focusing on each cobblestone, I'd never get to the steeple. So you have to distribute your attention around the scene to put down what's important. My goal is not to capture infinite detail, but just the essential center points of my attention. I'm interested in that silhouette edge of the tree, the complex filigree of leaves along the edge, so I'll try to include that with dry brush. But when it comes to the details on the church itself, the dentelated details on the cornice and the hands and numbers on the clock, those I can downplay by painting them softly and let the viewer's brain fill in that detail. Now that dark that I put down for the trees on the left, I need to lighten that with a green and save the darkest dark for the very base of those trees, where the light doesn't get in too easily. To maximize the distance between me and the church, I want to resolve the middle ground details alongside the walkway. Put in that low wall on the left, a little curb along the road. Framing the cobblestone path leading up to the church are big rectangular slates. Obviously, I can't capture every one of those stones, but I can suggest them. And although they all look uneven gray in the photograph, when I look at them, there's a lot of variation of warm and cool, variation in tone. And I can also work on the steeple, which includes the tower, which has the clock, and then the lantern with the two arch-topped louvered windows I'm painting now. Above that is the belfry where the bell is contained. Trinity Church was built in 1726 and 27, and the steeple has remained all this time without being blown over. The one in Boston that it's based on, of the famous Paul Revere's ride, that's been blown down about 3 times. This one is all wood, so it's quite a testament to the people who engineered it that they did a good job of making the internal structure strong enough to stand up to windstorms. Now the spire, the very top, using a ruler to balance my brush, keep it straight. The busy sidewalk behind us has people who come and go over the 3 hours that we spend here. The sun also comes and goes. Occasionally it's overcast as a cloud goes in front of the sun, so I try to remember what effects I want to capture with that brilliant lighting. This is a popular place for weddings. So many weird random things happen when you're out painting. Now I just want to get these lanterns in. This place would be beautiful at nighttime. Everything leads to the focal point back here, and what do I need in the focal point? How about a couple of figures facing away, walking into the scene, a guy and a woman. And you really don't need that much detail in a picture like this. Because if you provide a few characteristic details, the viewer will supply the rest with their own imagination. And the painting will seem complete, not because you included a lot of photographic detail, but because you allowed the viewer to be involved with the process of evoking the scene. So what's the takeaway from all this for us as painters? The photograph and the painting interpret reality in very different ways. The photograph captures all the detail, but it lacks the color information that the painting provides. Why does the painting look so different? Well, you're limited by the materials and the brushes, but also by the fact that the painting is reality filtered through visual perception, through our minds and hands. And that's what makes it magical, I think, too. Both photography and painting are legitimate ways to capture the world. If you work only from photographs, it's good to keep in mind how much you're missing in terms of color. But if you work on location, it's good to know that the photograph can be a great way to capture information to use later in a painting. It all comes down to knowing the difference between the two and knowing the limitations of each way of seeing the world.